Hello there! So, if I say this is a video about technical mapping, one of two things will come to mind. You'll either think this video covers maps like this, with lots of weird rhythms and fancy slider shapes, or you'll think I'm joking. And both would be right. In July 2017, I made a video about a type of mapping poorly coined as wub maps. In it, I talked about how this style grew popular around 2015 through examples of a couple well-known maps created by Skystar. The video was straightforward enough, but the passing of a year and a half has shown changes in the public perception of these maps, and shown me that there's more related to the subject worth expanding on. So that's what we're doing today, but not solely from my view this time. I sat down with someone who's been involved in this mapping style since its near beginning and has seen firsthand how the style has developed. ProfessionalBox. If you've followed mapping for the past few years, you've heard his name. He was involved with the drum and bass mapping scene in 2014, then he shifted towards wub mapping when that began a year later, and in recent time, he's been responsible for creating one of the game's most popular maps through building on the wub style. Talk of that comes later though. First, I wanted to see how someone more integrated with this side of mapping saw the rise of the vague wub map category. As should have been expected, he paints a different, much more detailed picture of it than I previously explained on my own.
I would say that the grandfather of wub mapping, if you can call someone that, the first person to start shifting mapping towards the current wub meta would be Nold, with his map Tecna, submitted back in March of 2013, which funnily enough is 1 month after the Pretender. It's amazing, like, see how much the game changed in 1 month, or how much of the future of the game was based in 1 month of time. Anyways, Tecna was the first map where you can see the kind of patterning modern wub maps utilize. With this style of mapping, Nold inspired the people who made first actual wub maps, of which Funzen and Skystar as mappers stand out to me. In December of 2013, Funzen submitted a map called Move That Body, which was actually mapped to a song that had these recognizable wub sounds, hence the name wub mapping. There were maps mapped to songs like this earlier that year as well, but I picked this map to talk about since this map incorporates different slider velocities and unique slider shapes for these wub sounds, although in a very minor scale compared to today. A whole year after Move That Body, a mapper known as Skystar submitted the map called Neuronesia. This was the next big meta shifter after what RLC had done with the Pretender. Neuronesia took the ideas of what Nold and later Funzen had scraped upon and took them much further. The gameplay in Neuronesia was unbelievably fun for its time. It's the movement again. I can't explain it, but it's the kick slide patterns in Neuronesia are super fun. Also, the way the sliders flow into each other. Like, you know when you play the game, you know if a movement is fun. And the visuals. If you want to have something that stands out to people and something that people remember and drop their jaws on, you'll have to appeal to them with the visuals as well. Every single standout map in the past has something visual in it, whether it be the consistent how do you pronounce anhedonia? The consistent beauty of that, or the Aspire from Monstratus, where it's like two patterns are like whoa, or maybe the big black with its back and forth slider jumps that rotate. Like, this is the stuff you remember. That's the image that get planted into your head, not how it felt to play, because you can replicate the gameplay of all of those, and because it doesn't give you that impact in your head, you're just like, you forget it, even if it feels good to play. That's my argument.
In summary, these three guys were some of the major influencers who led to the current web mapping generation. Their work wasn't an instant boom though. Looking at the dates each of their standout maps were made shows that this took a while to catch on. The upsurge in web maps really happened after Neuronesia, and according to Probox, that's because it was the first map with wide appeal that had all the necessary elements used in modern web mapping. Which are these. For the most part, this is what I covered in my initial web mapping video, so I don't think we need to sit through it again. What I missed out on, though, was how the style changed. Web mapping supposedly had another notable shift that doesn't get as much credit as those old, what I'll call legendary maps.
The last big map to impact the web mapping meta, in my eyes, is Euclid, which was mapped by Far. I think Euclid was like the map that popularized slider velocities over 2. It was like the map that just accelerated the development to what led to today. People such as myself, Rurucci, and many others drew a lot of inspiration from this map in particular. So if you were inspired by Rurucci in 2016, you were indirectly influenced by Euclid. That's the kind of map it was.
and that essentially covers the development of web mapping up through today. We're only getting started here though, so it might be time to clarify what I meant at the beginning of this video, why I said technical mapping is a joke.
It's funny because frankly, I have no clue what indeed is a technical map or a tech map. I hate the term. If you start to analyze it though, I think the word itself doesn't have a definition, but it's rather what is left over from the other categorizations such as a PP map, a jump map, a stream map, etc. And if your map cannot be put into any of those categories easily, then people just use the word in question. By nature, I feel like how the term is used in these days, it's just despite those who map hardest slider or reading heavy maps, which makes it reek of negativity, as some people use it ironically and fuel the generalization of different maps that aren't their cup of tea. So maps that they don't like, they just categorize with that word. That being said, I do know how convenient it is to group maps together like this, and yes, I'm guilty of doing this kind of categorization myself for stream and jump maps, but those are such neutral terms. I don't think they have any bad intentions, like even the slightest bit or negativity reeking from them.
Tech mapping is a joke in the same way that anime mapping is used to describe random jump maps, and from what I've seen floating around, it also seems like web mapping in general has had its reputation on the decline. Maybe it's because these maps are no longer the new thing, or maybe it's because people are annoyed by the direction they've gone. I can't really say. What I can say though is that critique towards this type of mapping has directly hit ProfessionalBox with the creation of a map you've likely heard of. Exit this... I'll just call it Atmosphere 2. This song is a hyper-intense remix of one of Osu's most hyped maps, Ruruchi's Atmosphere 1, and Probox's version capitalized on the song's fame by involving a bunch of well-known mappers to create something of comparable hype. The map ended up spreading fast, and really, I'm sure you've all heard of it by now, so I shouldn't need to cover this. Lots of people think the map is cool, but it was also seen as something ridiculous by many mappers and players. That's why I asked Probox about the map's goals and its public feedback.
What I and we as a team wanted to achieve with Atmosphere was a map that combines all of our different styles and creates an experience that can match up to the hype of the original song. But even with this goal, we didn't have goals such as pushing ranking criteria or creating brand new ways to make a map like an Aspire would. Answering to the question of what made the map itself popular, it's a combination of 4 key things. 1, people recognize the names of the mappers. 2, the media outlets that the finished map was shown on. Number 3, come on, it's chameleon. And the last point, the map itself. I explained earlier what makes a map that stands out and sticks to people. You need to have visuals that sticks to your mind. So, for example, the map has a rocket ship slider. You remember that, it gets branded to your brain. You remember, oh, the rocket ship slider. Atmosphere, this kind of thing. As for the criticism, I went to a lot of streams, so I saw what the general thoughts on the map were. There were just words, these regular Oz buzzwords that were used, mainly unplayable. I don't know if people mean by that it's something is unplayable when you can't combo it or when you can't pass it. If someone says the map is unplayable, in my eyes they're objectively wrong, because unplayable to me means you can't play it, but you can definitely play it. And the other criticism was overhyped, which isn't even criticism on the map itself, but rather it's criticism on the fact that it spread so far and so fast. Therefore, it's criticizing those who favorited the map, not the map itself. So the 2 words that were thrown around the most didn't even criticize the map itself. Of course, there were words that just said the map is bad. Fine, that's actual criticism, not constructive, but that's like criticizing the map itself at least. So.
The clearest example of people saying the map was bad was all the complaints about these little slider bumps, informally called slider tumors. According to Probox, their frequency in this map is part of what makes it stick in your mind, alongside the iconic rocket ship, but mappers viewed this type of slider design as something way too over the top, and therefore criticized it in some legitimately creative ways. But yeah, this negative perception of modern web mapping can easily be tied to another part of the mapping world Probox is connected to, Aspire. The Aspire Mapping Contest, if you're not aware, is an annual contest where mappers gather to break the game in a competitive way, and Probox was the winner of the event last year. For the upcoming Aspire, however, there's been a different air to it. Publicly, there's been a lot more pessimism towards the contest. Storyboard-reliant maps like Aleph Zero became popular, and in response, you can find a lot of players and mappers saying these maps are stupid because they only appeal through flashiness. People who put in the effort to become innovative mappers are being less appreciated than people who can make cool storyboards, which has made for a dull mood over Aspire. Even with Aspire's attempts to counter this by having a separate Spectacle award, there's still a notable public distaste for the whole thing.
It's funny because back in 2016, after Monstrada had won his Aspire, I remember talking with him about the same thing. I think my own words were pretty much, I'm very pessimistic about the Aspire for 2017. I don't think anyone can innovate a cool gameplay element to make the contest Aspire worthy. And a year from that conversation, I was the one who held the title. So I think it's just easier to be pessimistic about Aspire so that you don't get disappointed if nothing stands out. It's also easy to be arrogant and think that there is no way that someone could do something that would impress me, you know? And the only thing I'm worried about for this year's Aspire is that the idea of Aspire, the innovation, like I'm worried that that gets lost and Aspire becomes a popularity contest where something unimportant like memes referred to last year's dab slider or just pure visual flashiness without innovating anything becomes so impactful and memorable that the core idea of Aspire gets lost and an entry which actually innovates but is still polished and structured properly loses to something like this.
We'll have slider animations this year of the Fortnite default dance. That's what will win.
Yeah.
If that exists, that would win, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, now that you said it, the thing is, would top mappers, the people who have the potential to contest, would they resort to that to ensure that they get the meme votes as well, you know? I really hope that won't happen this year.
Despite the negative outlook though, probox still thinks innovation in mapping is possible, just not in the same way it has been in the past. He appreciates that there's attempts of making innovation possible through rewards like Aspire, but there's not enough rewards besides that to make it worthwhile.
Simply put, yes, innovation in mapping is still possible. The real reason why mapping has slowed down, it's evolving compared to the past. We're reaching the ceiling of human capability to play the game, like you would in any regular physical activity such as running. The best top runners, the times change by such small margins. So we're seeing this in play in us already. But because mapping exists to provide content for the players to play, we can innovate further and faster than players can improve. And you can see this clearly with the increasing number of unplayable maps and the negativity towards certain maps by mappers and players. If we want to accelerate the speed at which the meta evolves, the people who have this power, whether it be the QA or game designers, they can definitely speed up the process of how mapping will change. So even if it's a minor update, that could be huge. We saw what happened when slider velocity changes were discovered. The game gained an entire new subgenre of maps, that being WoB maps. And then lastly, there is the community. If your map sucks to play, people will let you know this map sucks. If it sucks to look at, well, people will let you know that as well. If you look at what happened to someone like HoloWings back in the days, if you think about how much impact she had during the years while still having to face so much slashback for all of her maps, what if HoloWings would have gotten discouraged by that feedback? We wouldn't have gotten so many HoloWing maps in the game and we wouldn't have seen so many gimmicks being used. But most people in this game, if you flame their maps, they will remember the flame and they get discouraged. Like, imagine the amount of good mappers that get discouraged by these comments on their first map and quit the game. Innovation, if it isn't rewarded or encouraged, nobody would have any incentive to pursue it. And even one person can make a huge difference in the way he or she innovates.
So while it's possible to say innovation has stopped in mapping because, say, Osu's developers haven't fixed 2B's autofail issues, there's still a community side to innovative mapping that makes it unrewarding. Whether today's so-called tech maps are innovative isn't really worth arguing about, but keeping in mind what probox said may prove useful if you're interested in making maps that deviate from the norms of mapping, or as is often the case now, reasonable playability. Anyway, this has been a long one. Thanks to probox for doing this interview with me, thanks to you for watching, and I'll see you next week.